Hey, we are really excited to have our last guest for Men's Month, Jackson Herlong. Jackson is dialing in from Greenville, South Carolina, where he works with Sotheby's International Realty and his mom's firm, Joan Herlong Associates. And Jackson is an amazing guy. He is going to be representing the millennial perspective today in our interview. And Jackson grew up in Greenville. And he went to Davidson College, and then he moved to Chicago and did a couple of different things and went to law school at South Carolina, and then finally decided to come back and work with his family, where he's been crushing it. And he also has a new baby and a wife, and he is starting his journey into building his family and doing everything. And Jackson and I have been working together for the last year, and he is an amazing guy, and we are really fortunate to have him here today. Jackson, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be asked. Happy to be here.
So Jackson, as you know, we talk a lot about the imprinting years, the first 10 years of your life and how it forms you. And so I want to hear a little bit about the first 10 years of your life. As a guy growing up, what were you learning about male role models and how to be a man in the world?
Yeah, so I'm one of four kids, and I'm the oldest, and I'm the only boy. So I didn't spend a lot of time playing with my sisters during those years. They had their own stuff going on, and so I would read a lot. And my dad amassed this really awesome collection of 70s comic books: Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, you name it. And so I would just immerse myself. I'd probably go in like their walk-in closet and lay on the floor and read comic books for hours. And there are some consistent stories and archetypes of men that are shared in those books. And I really sort of internalized that. To be manly, to be heroic, you have to show up for people. You have to be one of the good guys and use your power to protect people or to help people or to help society or whatever. And if you had powers and you used them for selfishness, then you were one of the bad guys. And they, always lose in the end in these stories, but it's not an easy fight for the good guys. But that, it creates an aspirational thing. You want to be a good guy as opposed to a bad guy always. And at least when you're a kid, and you're reading things on simple level like that. So it just sort of went to show me that in order to be a real man, real manly, you needed to show up for other people, to protect them, to care for them, to rescue them if they needed it, et cetera, et cetera.
And to be the hero, right? You had to be the hero. And who was it that you were always rescuing? Who are the superheroes always rescuing?
Yeah, it's a very gender dynamic. If there's one person, think of Superman and Lois Lane, Spider-Man and Mary Jane. They each have their person that they have to rescue over and over again because they're attacking this vulnerable person to really get to the less vulnerable person that is then required to take action to save the person or whatever. Yeah, it's women are treated like an object in some sense in that, which is too bad in its own right.
Because men are taught very early on that their job is to protect women and to be their protectors and to be seen as the superhero and to be seen as the one who comes and saves the day. And and that they're good guys and bad guys, that they're going to be good guys and bad guys in the world, and that you've got to put your cape on or whatever it is and get out into the world and save and protect your family or your lover, your the girl in your life, and protect them from the bad guys. And it's kind of sweet in lots of ways that that's what the boys are growing up with. It's not different from girls growing up with Disney characters of Cinderella or whatever, but it's kind of interesting. What else did you learn from the real male characters in your life, your dad or your uncles or the men in your community? What were they showing you about how to be a man? Like, what were you learning through osmosis or watching?
Yeah. So my dad's an attorney, and that really sort of aligned with the same kind of lessons I was taking from the superhero comic books, in that he was great. I loved him. He was my dad. And people went to him when they had problems they couldn't solve themselves. That was what always appealed to me about the legal profession. It's actually why I went to law school. Believe it or not, my law school essay was all about Spider-Man's motto of "with great power comes great responsibility." You can't just use it for yourself. You have to use it for other people if you want to be considered a good guy.
Right.
And so
Right.
that really appealed to me, that his job was people coming to him with problems and then him finding a way to solve those problems. And
So let me ask you a question about men that just is interesting to me. Do you think I've heard a lot of the guys that I coach say that when they were growing up, their father, and women have said this too, you are not allowed to question your father. Your father was always right. And, you know, and that's kind of interesting. Like now we live in a world where everybody gets feedback and everybody's right and wrong. And men have to show up and get feedback from women that they're doing a bad job or that they need to grow. Do you think this is a big hurdle for men? Because if they're trying to be superheroes, they don't want their weaknesses exposed. So do you think that's a hard thing for men? If you know they're thinking in their head, I've got to be perfect. I've got to be the good guy. Do you think it makes them hide their weaknesses more or be more sensitive when someone's pointing them out?
yeah, I definitely think that vulnerability is a challenge for everybody, but probably specifically for men. It's been a challenge for me at various times in my life, for sure. You know, you want to be seen as capable, as competent, as having all your act together at any one time when anybody's looking at you from an outside perspective. But like you said, every superhero has a weakness. And that's sort of part of the story, is finding a way to accommodate for that weakness and still be a hero while other people are going to try to exploit it all the time. You know, I mean, Superman's weakness is kryptonite. So everybody that fights him tries to bring kryptonite in some way, shape, or form. So he's got to be prepared for that. So
let me ask a question. Do you think would men rather receive negative feedback from a woman or a man? Now that's generic, but what's your instinct on that question? Because I'm not even really sure. Like, what would be easier, like, to hear it from?
You know, I haven't really considered that. My therapist and my coach, are both women. And I don't think that I necessarily sought that out, but I wonder if the dynamic would be different if there was a man telling me these kind of things and challenging me on the same kind of level that you and my therapist also do, which is very helpful.
Right.
You know, holding up a mirror to anybody that wants to change is the best way to inspire change. But I wonder if a man in the same position as you or as my therapist wouldn't have a totally different take on the issues that I'm facing, because they face them from the same masculine perspective that I did. You know, I mean, getting an alternative perspective on things is often very helpful. So I've found therapy and coaching to be incredibly helpful, not necessarily because I'm being, you know, given therapy or being coached by females, but that's what's happened. And it's very, very useful for me.
Right. Right. Well, I was curious because sometimes you have to get the ego out of the way to hear feedback. And, you know, sometimes guys together can't get their ego out of the way, whereas they might soften to a woman. Same time, if they're trying to be the hero to the woman, it's harder. So by the way, it's hard for everybody to hear feedback. Totally. It's hard for women too. So I don't mean to make it that everybody has a hard time. So it's not
Men's
just
Health Month. So we're talking about it from a men's perspective, of course, but it's difficult to be a person and to get feedback on things. And unless you don't want to change, and then feedback is no problem.
Yeah. So, you know, as you've kind of been raised, you know, growing as a guy and living in the male world, what do you see some of the changes that men have gone through that are good and what are hard? So what, like men today, what do you see are some of the changes that they're going through as men?
I don't think the role of a man is as defined, as necessarily pigeonholed in society anymore. And that's a blessing and a curse. It's not bad or good. It just is, you know, the platonic ideal of a man, probably in my father's generation, was, I don't know, maybe your John Wayne type, strong, silent, capable, maybe suffering on the inside, maybe not, but you'd never know because they wouldn't talk about it. And, you know, with the rise of the internet over the course of my generation and the ability to access the thoughts of anybody that wants to share them online over time, et cetera, I think we're coming to an understanding that nobody fits into any particular box, you know, not men, not women, not even any one individual person. If you try to put somebody in the box of, oh, you're a person from South Carolina, oh, you're a tall person, oh, you're a Clemson fan, all these other things about you must be true. And that's not the case for people. And I think people really have a clear understanding about that now. And I don't know that they did. I mean, I wasn't present for it, obviously, but I mean, in my parents' generation, I think that, you know, a man was a man and that meant a certain set of things, and a woman was a woman and that meant a certain set of things. And of course, there's always exceptions to everything. But I think on the whole, society's expectation for what the role of a man was in, I don't know, 1970 versus 2023 is dramatically different.
So do you think it's better? Do they, I mean, now it's less limited. Men have more choices. They have more options. They can be more of anything. They can be stay-at-home dads. They can turn into women. They can, you know, whatever. They can be more fluid with their sexuality. They can be the archetype of a male. They can be softer. They can go to therapy. You know, do you think it's better or do you think it's harder? Or what do you think of both sides? What's better? What's worse?
You know, one of the mottos that I repeat over and over again is the key to life is appropriate expectations. And I think that applies here. You know, you can't expect yourself to just fit in that box. And okay, I'm a man, so this is the things that are good for me. These are things that are bad for me. And that's the life that I'll live. You know, you just kind of figure it out as you go along, whether you're a man or a woman or pink and purple polka dotted people eater or whatever, you know, but life is not easy, you know, it's being alive is sort of a state of suffering on one level. And so we find ways to make it better. And oftentimes that comes from playing a role in other people's lives. Oftentimes that comes from playing a role in your own life. But I think that realizing that there's not any one way to do something is definitely a blessing for people in my generation. You know, it's not, I'm sure kids today are struggling just as much as I did, just as much as my dad did, as who do I want to be and what kind of person do I want to be when I grow up? But I think the possibilities are probably, the imagined possibilities are probably far beyond what they were even when I was growing up.
So now being a dad and, you know, you just had a baby and, you know, you're taking on a father role and you're also, you know, earning money for your family and, you know, you're kind of a millennial dad. So like, this is like a new generation of men. Tell me about how that's going and how that feels. And what do you think is different? What do you think are the challenges of being a millennial, you know, a man of your generation? How do you be a great guy? You know,
yeah. I mean, it's something that I struggle with on a day-to-day basis. You know, how do you be a great guy? How do you be a good guy, et cetera? We have our first baby. You're right. She will be 11 months next week. So it's been a fun year with her. And it's been a year of learning, you know, and there are some things that only a mom can do. There are some things that anybody can do. We're in the stage now where it's kind of the things that anybody can do, raising the kid. So we've had to be pretty conscious about, you know, that's not a mommy job. That's not a daddy job. That's a whoever is available to do it job. It's not like mommy's getting up with the baby only, or daddy never does or whatever. It's we're focused on what we're trying to accomplish. We want to raise a kid, you know, and what that means is we both have a role to play in that. And that role looks like whatever it looks like on a day-to-day basis. It's not, you know, hey, go finish making me dinner and, you know, watch the baby and I'll pat her on the head before you serve me dinner and put her to bed. And that would be crazy. You know, she'd be like, did you hit your head today or something? What's wrong with you?
You might be in a lot of trouble with your wife if you said that.
I think I would. Yeah, I think I'd be in a lot of trouble.
Right. So now you feel like it's a lot more dividing and conquering. Do you think if I interviewed your wife, she would say you're doing the 50% of the roles?
I hope. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't mean that as like a catch, but like,
no.
You know, a lot of times the guys
it's a fair
feel
question.
Like
it's a very fair question. You know, I hear her with the baby in the background right now, and should I be helping her? You know, but I you know, I love doing it. It's not like it's any kind of a burden. And for me, it's just getting clear on what you're trying to accomplish, like with anything. Really helps you understand like the way to do it or the motivation behind it. And what we're trying to accomplish is raise a kid. Do
you think it's harder for guys to dive in and do the work around the house and do the baby stuff because that was not role model to them. So it's not as instinctive. It's like, okay, right, I'm supposed to help. You know, do you think it's harder for them?
I can imagine that it is. You know, I have some friends who are going through the same thing that I'm going through right now. And one of them, for example, is trying to get on the golf course every time he can just to be away
Yeah.
from the house because he feels useless. He feels like he doesn't necessarily want to help. It's, you know, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but I think he's struggling with what the role of a man or
Yeah.
what the role of a parent is in his baby's life. And I'm lucky that that's not me. I don't feel any compulsion to be away from the house or away from the baby. I want to be holding her. I want to be raising her. But I could certainly imagine if I was like caught up in, is this manly? Is this not manly? Is that good? Is that a good thing for me to do? That would sort of influence my decision-making on that kind of stuff. But I really don't have much time for that.
Well, I
So
also
it's
think
never
it's
really come into play.
intimidating. I also think a lot of men get intimidated because you pick up a baby and the baby starts crying. So then you think, I'm not good
Oh
at
God.
this.
Yeah.
I'm not good at this.
I
You
mean,
know?
I've got to say, Liz, I have had no interest in holding anyone's baby in my entire life until I had my own baby. And it's not that babies aren't cute, you know, it's just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. I don't really
Yeah.
know how to hold it. I don't know. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have your own and it's second nature. And it's like, why did I ever even think that way? But you're right. I mean, I was very apprehensive going into the hospital, you know, when we were going to have that baby. It's like, what am I going to do? I don't know how to do anything.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you just figure it out, just like caring for anybody else in your life. You figure out what they need and you give it to them.
Right. Okay. So I want to ask one other thing before we have to end, which is about good guys and bad guys. So something I definitely see is that men really want to be good guys. They want to be the hero in the story, right? And they want to be gentlemen and they want to be like revered by the people who love them and by society. But it's really hard, right? It's hard. And how do men strike that balance between being the good guy and the bad guy? Because being the bad guy is tempting all the time. It's tempting to be, you know, drawn into that bad guy character, right? So how do they navigate that?
Yeah, there's no real easy answer for it. And as a kid, I without having boys at home, you know, only having sisters, there were years of my life in middle school where I didn't really get the banter thing, you know, how men really talk to each other and sort of are playful on one level, but they're also sort of like being insulting on another level. It's like a bad guy way of talking almost, you know, but they're not being bad. It's just building bonds or whatever. Everybody really wants to be that good guy, be that moral person that has, you know, is elevated in these superhero stories that we're talking about and fit into that archetype of being a good guy. But like you said, in the stories, it's really interesting that the bad guys often are, very sinister. They want to take over the whole world, whatever. But then every once in a while, there are ones that aren't, that have motivation that's more understandable to the average reader, where they want to protect their wife or something like that. But they're willing to go to extreme negative lengths in order to do that, you know? And that's the thing, is keeping everything in perspective, you know? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to make the world a better place? Are you trying to make it a better place for your people, for your family? Or are you trying to make it a better place for you? You know, and what does that mean? What does that come at the expense of? You know, if I was to go home at night and say, hey, let me know when dinner's ready and when you can bring me the baby so I can kiss her and put her to bed, I think I would be making the world a worse place for everybody but myself in that role.
Yeah.
And that's probably kind of being a bad guy, you know, and falling into that the traditional masculinity role and being like, well, I get dinner, you cook dinner, I kiss the baby on the head, you raise the baby, and that's just how it is.
Yeah.
To me, that's bad.
But I think something that's interesting, because something we see a lot with men is they have a really hard time separating masculinity from vulnerability, right? Like strong, Clint Eastwood type, John Wayne, I have no problems, right? I'm strong and I'm capable and that's it. And so we have all these examples for men that you're either a good guy or you're not. You're on the other side. And the reality is, like what you're saying, is it's everything in between. And everything that can help men is recognizing you can be masculine and vulnerable. You can be good and you can struggle, but it's not one or the other. And what I find men do a lot is when they're not being a good guy, they try to hide it because they're so afraid of them being on the bad guy side.
Yep.
And so then they try to hide it instead of just being accountable. And that's really where all the growth is for men recognizing, hey, it's not good or bad. It's a whole bunch of gray. And, you know, you're okay. You can be a good guy and you can struggle and you don't have to hide it. And that's really where we need to
good guys
see
have
that.
bad days. Bad guys have good days, you know, and everybody else is everywhere in between.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't even have to see it as these extremes. So anyway, Jackson, thank you so much. It was so great to have you. I really appreciate you coming on. And as always, just a real pleasure to talk to you and hear your story.
Yeah, happy to share it and happy to be asked. So look forward to our next chat.
All right. Thanks, Jackson. Bye.
See ya.